own experience and studies in the field. And more importantly, we realized that these problems are in big part attributed to learning in the early years and to the gaps in early childhood care in the country. In the course of our work, we realized that many Filipino children in their primary years are not equipped with the foundational skills in reading and writing, that are needed to learn well in school. So, learning is cumulative. And so what you learn in the early years are the building blocks, the stepping stones to later learning, into more complex learning. And if you don't learn well, then you will not learn well later on. Statistics show that 30% of Filipino children under 5 years old are stunted. The causes of physical stunting, malnutrition, undernutrition, cause not just physical stunting, but also affect the mental, cognitive, and emotional health of children, as there's a strong connection between the gut and the brain. Additionally, we see that the stress, especially occurring in poor communities because of the lack of financial means and a host of other problems, can cause a change in brain architecture. This is exacerbated as children in poor communities are exposed to the stress of their caregivers and teachers and do not have the sufficient emotional and social support needed. As parents and caregivers themselves experience stress and also need to prioritize work to be able to support their families. This also affects brain architecture. These gaps need to be urgently and effectively addressed. Studies have shown that 90% of brain development happens before the age of 5. And so the brain is extremely malleable at this point. We need to take much greater care of our children at this early and crucial stage in their lives. The first 5 years serve as the foundation of their learning and development later in life. As many experts in the field would say, early childhood experiences last and can last a lifetime. So it is important that young children are raised in an environment that is nourishing, responsive, and safe, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. Recognizing these challenges, our organization, the Knowledge Channel Foundation, has recently given much greater focus to creating initiatives primarily on early childhood care and development. We have recently launched the Talk Ed, a once-a-month online educational show where experts are invited to address relevant issues on early childhood development. Some topics we covered this year include whole child development through play, positive discipline, and the growth mindset. Alam naman ninyo, there are still, parents and caregivers that provide, discipline, not positively, but, even corporal punishment, which we feel is, very detrimental to children's health. And so we also continue to acquire and create various shows that are relevant to early childhood development, such as Doc Wikipedia and Musikantahan, which are accessible in our different platforms, on air, online, and offline. And we're also excited this month or next month to launch I Love You 1000, a series that we co-created with the National Nutrition Council to guide and support parents, teachers, and care providers of children ages 0 to 5. We're also working in partnership with the Power of Zero to produce Filipino versions of their Heroes of Zero videos for young children. In addition to this shows, we launched the Knowledge Channel Teaching in the New Normal for Early Childhood Development, or the KCTIN ECD, through which we provide Child Development Center workers and teachers with training on key topics, such as the effective use of technology in education for young learners. One of the things that we emphasize in this training is a need for adults, teachers and parents alike, to be able to manage and improve their own mental health so that they can provide adequate support to their children and avoid actions that may add to their stress and affect their brain architecture. I cannot emphasize this enough. Managing a child's mental and emotional health is as important as managing his or her physical health. Both affect the brain architecture of a child. I'm sharing all of this to reassure all of you who are working in the early childhood care and development sector that you're not alone. That there are numerous organizations in the country that are committed to the advocacy of improving the quality of young Filipino children. But we need to call for more support, more organizations, both from the government and from the private sector as well. We all have to come together to collaborate and call for more partners to support early childhood. In fact, the Knowledge Channel Foundation is part of the Asia Philanthropy Circle, a platform where philanthropists and their respective organizations learn, connect, and collaborate towards advancing a better Asia. And we're happy to share with you that we have come together with our fellow member organizations in supporting ECD. You'll hear more about them later, but just to share some of the work that they do individually, the Ramon Aboitiz Foundation Incorporated, or RAFI, has been partnering with local government units to equip daycare centers or child development centers with developmentally appropriate furniture, materials, and playgrounds. They have also launched the DUA Academy, a capacity building program for child development center workers, emphasizing developmentally appropriate practice and play. Ayala Foundation has been operating the Buklod Bahayan Child Development Center in Silang, Cavite since 2017, as well as the Iraya Mangyan Child Development Center in Talipanan, Mindoro since 2020. These programs aim to help address the current learning poverty by providing professional development programs and courses to upskill and reskill daycare center teachers to promote holistic child development as well as family and community engagement. Meanwhile, our other partner, our other APC member, the Zwilig Family Foundation, has also been running nutrition governance programs and has trained 1,754 leaders in the provinces of Samar, Northern Samar, Zamboanga del Norte, Sarangani, Basilan, and through its partners in the city of Manila. Our partners from the member organizations of the APC in the Philippines will be sharing more about their initiatives in ECD during this discussion that we will have later today. And I hope our organization, the Asia Philanthropy Circle, or APC, will also share many more of their initiatives in ECD as well later today. I'd like to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart for your commitment to providing effective early childhood care and education for our children. They are the future leaders of our country, and we should work together to ensure that they have the best opportunities in life as early as possible. We cannot say, bata pa yan, or, the children, these children that are 0 to 5 are too young for our, focus and priority. We cannot say that. They have to have really the best that we can give them. We hope that this multi-sectoral symposium will serve as a springboard for increased attention, discussion, and collaboration in the early childhood space among government, the private sector, and nonprofit organizations like us for the benefit of the Filipino children and their families. Let me reiterate that early childhood experiences last a lifetime and beyond, actually, and beyond a lifetime. So I don't know if you know that when mothers or pregnant women actually eat or take care of themselves, they don't just nourish themselves and their children, but they nourish the children of their children and their children. So it spans generations. So let us start today to help our children and their caregivers and parents and work smartly and strategically towards better cared children and a better Philippines. We look forward to a meaningful and fruitful discussion today. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the messages, Sir Romel and Miss Rina. It has really set the tone for our symposium today. And I am sure that our participants are looking forward to a morning or rather evening for those who are in a different time zone, filled with knowledge and inspiration to conduct research and create policies and programs on children's mental health, especially for those who are in the early years. I know that you are all anticipating the presentations of our speakers, but before we start, let me share the objectives of today's symposium. First, to present best practices in creating programs and safe spaces that promote mental health awareness for children in the early years and their families. Second, to discuss how multi-sectoral partnerships and government policies can support and protect children and their families' mental health. And lastly, to discuss the importance of child-centered policies that protect children's mental health. To achieve these goals, we invited expert speakers to discuss topics related to mental health and early childhood care and development. But before we move to the presentations, let us first listen to our keynote speaker for today. She is a health and women's rights advocate, a proud activist, and a champion of marginalized groups. She is also a recipient of the 10 Outstanding Young Men Award for Peace Advocacy and was one of the 27 Filipinas that were nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. We have also invited her today because she sponsored and principally authored the Philippines' first true national policy on mental health, which is the Philippine Mental Health Law. By now, I know you already have an idea of who she is. Please help me welcome one of the Philippines' hardworking senators, ladies and gentlemen, Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Magandang araw sa inyong lahat. Thank you, Early Childhood Care and Development Council, in partnership with the Asia Philanthropy Circle and its member organizations in the Philippines, Ayala Foundation, the Knowledge Channel Foundation, Ramon Apoitis Foundation, and Zuelig Family Foundation for making this possible. As chair of the Senate Committee on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, as author of the Mental Health Law, and as a lifelong advocate, health is an advocacy close to my heart because health in mind and body is the first freedom we need before we can pursue or dream of anything else. What we are learning now as a society, even in the healthcare sector, is that mental health is a non-negotiable and is a necessary part of our well-being. Nurturing good mental health starts in the womb. The moment a child is conceived, his or her family, together with the whole community, has the obligation to ensure that the child will be born in a safe and nurturing environment. A stable mind starts during infancy, once attachment with the main caregiver is established and the needs of the infant are met. It is based on this fact that we were relentless in expanding the maternity leave law, which we successfully passed in 2019, which increases paid maternity leave to 105 days. The first 1,000 days law, or the Kalusugan at Nutrisyon ng Magnanay Act, which I also authored, ensures that mothers have support during and after pregnancy, and that the needs of children during this important foundational period are met in order to properly shape and support their development and well-being. Moreover, all the early experiences of people have a lifelong impact on our development as adults. Ang mga bata na hindi nagkaroon ng sapat at tamang kalinga ay dinadala ang experience na ito hanggang sila ay tumanda. As Frederick Douglass said, it is easier to build strong children than to repair broken adults. Kaya naman mahalaga na tugunan ang mental health during the early years. Dahil kapag nakapagpalaki tayo ngayon ng mga batang may matibay at masayang kaisipan, asahan natin na maiibsan ang mga mental health issues na kanilang haharapin sa kanilang pagtanda. The mental health law we passed in 2018 addresses mental health issues in the Philippines. Through this law, LGUs have been able to create ordinances pertaining to psychosocial services in their communities. In fact, Barangay Lahu, Cebu City, has even created a barangay behavioral health unit which has the GASG program. It pertains to ginikanan, mother or father, anak support group. Hopefully, other LGUs and other policymakers follow suit in including children and their families in their mental health programs in order to support parents in raising healthy and happy children who will eventually be productive citizens of the country. Additionally, issues on postpartum depression are usually untreated and are filled with stigma. This law can help in addressing the shame of mothers in admitting that they need help, that they need support, and they need time to recover in order to be the best mother they can be for their children. Bilang chairperson ng Senate Committee on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, at bilang magulang din, maaasahan niyo po na madami pa kaming gagawin upang mapahalagahan ang mental health ng mga bata at ng kanilang mga magulang. My friends, let's continue to build a healthy and caring foundation for Philippine society by taking care of our children now and the generations to come. Maraming salamat muli at mabuhay kayo.
Thank you, Senator Ontiveros, for your message. It is really important for policymakers to address various issues related to children in order for us to ensure good mental health and well-being. Hopefully, after this symposium, we will all be filled with inspiration and ideas as to how we can help raise mentally healthy Filipino children. Now, before I introduce our first speaker, we would like to thank the Asia Philanthropy Circle and its members here in the Philippines, the Knowledge Channel Foundation, Ayala Foundation, Ramon Aboitiz Foundation, and the Zulig Family Foundation for helping us invite our speakers for today and making this event possible. Hopefully, this will be the start of more partnerships and advocacy activities for children in the early years. Again, thank you, and we are truly grateful for the opportunity to work with all of you. To continue our program, let me introduce our first speaker for today. He is an expert on how children and adults learn through play and provides consultations at a bilateral, regional, and multilateral level to international partners and leaders. He also advises international organizations like the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, World Economic Forum, World Innovation Forum for Education, the UN General Assembly, and governments across the globe. He is also an awarded architect, robot designer, and elite researcher at the MIT Media Lab. So, to all our participants and viewers, let us welcome Mr. Bo Stiarna Thompson as he talks about strengthening children's mental health and helping families thrive through play. Please take note that after this presentation, we will be accommodating a few questions for Bo to answer before moving to the next speaker.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted here to attend this seminar on such a critical topic in terms of the mental health and well-being of children and families. And thank you to the Asia Philanthropy Circle and the partners. What great work you're doing. I can already sense how much support you're bringing to families, which is critical right now. So I will share a little bit about the Foundation's work, particularly around the role of play and on mental health. And it is a very important time to do so, to bring focus on the positive opportunities and interactions between parents, caregivers, and children, so they're able to get optimism, to see joy in difficult times. The work of the Lego Foundation spans across more than 60 countries, and we get our knowledge from an extensive number of research collaborations. So we support almost 20 research partners worldwide, from a center at University of Cambridge to MIT in USA to activities in Asia and China and beyond. We also work in more than 60 countries, many of which are on ground, where we gain practical experience around interventions. And then we operate by integrating evidence and consultation with local partners and scalable programs. And the majority of our work right now is in the early years, but we are gradually expanding that into primary school and into adolescence. It is a shared ambition among the LEGO entities to establish and innovate the relationship between children's development and learning and play. It's something that's absolutely essential in the early years, but not only in the early years. We should continue that focus on the joy and the active engagement in our interventions into school and even into adult life. And each of our entities have the opportunity to serve different audiences, and where the LEGO Foundation is critical from the research and social impact perspective as a 25% owner of the LEGO company. So it's very clear now from the evidence being generated over the past decade that play activities are the main mechanism for children to develop and learn. We can see that from the role of physical play, from the role of symbolic play, where children develop language and look at symbols, to pretend play, where they learn about relating to other people, social relationships, about the play with objects, to manipulate, to look at creativity, problem solving, cause and effect, and to games with rules, to look at constraints and collaborations. It is clear that if you look at the recommendations from the pediatrics, play is not frivolous. It enhances brain structure and function and promotes a process of learning which allows us to pursue goals and ignore distractions. And as was mentioned here in the introduction, it's very clear how that function works. It works in a way that when a young child is engaging with any kind of experiences around them, this is how the neurons they are born with begins to connect to others. It is through positive, playful experiences that they begin to wire their brain for what becomes the way they behave and act as adults. So this is kind of a function of how they relate to others. Touch and sense materials is how they begin to form their neural connections. And these connections are strengthened in the early years into age of 6 and beginning into adolescence, but then they're beginning to be more fixed. So this image shows how you have neurons that begins to be connected in the early years, and then you prune out the connections you don't use. You begin to have a fixed way of thinking about things. So really the early years is where you're most flexible, where we need the most support to begin to develop creative and engaged lifelong learners. That is really well documented now from the science, from the examples of the Harvard Center on Developing Child, but also a range of research publications which appear from our website also, and which I'll reference later. So the critical aspects of that experience are a few key factors to keep in mind for any kind of environment we're in. And these characteristics relate to that you figure out what's meaningful to a child, what's developmentally appropriate, connect to things they're interested in, they can relate to the caregivers, the things in the environment. It's something where they're active, not passive, because when they're active, they're much able to have conceptual understanding, able to keep attention, and be able to control behavior. And it's where they can iterate, which means they can test and try out different things, not doing the same thing over and over again, where they manipulate, they figure things out, they form hypotheses, and they figure out what ideas they can get. And it's about social interactions that reinforce learning and helps to detect mental states of others. And it's all in a process of joy, which is linked to motivation and interest, the joy of achieving something, that your ability to complete challenges, which is related to memory, attention, and creativity. So not only thinking about this as an activity of play, but more like a mindset, a feeling you have when you engage in any kinds of environment or relationship. So this is how young children do that naturally. When they observe situations in environment, they rebuild, they paint, they draw, they share it with others, and they begin to have a deeper understanding of these particular concepts and how they relate to them. So that evidence is really piling up right now. This is an overview of what we shared just a few weeks back. One of the bigger reviews we did with our research partners, demonstrating more than 350 research studies from more than 40 countries that demonstrate the relationship between play and a wide range of critical skills in the early years, but also into adolescence. And the most where the evidence is strongest is in the cognitive and social domains, but also in creativity and physical and emotional. So let's dive a little bit into some of the aspects of play and mental health. So the main mechanisms of play and mental health is very well documented. And this is a snapshot of some of the research studies. First and foremost, play is supporting basic functions like self-control, attention, and emotional regulation. So it means that a child is much better able to control their own impulses, to sustain attention and regulate their behavior if they have an opportunity to engage in play, free play, creative play, any aspect of play. But they also use play as a mechanism for coping with stressful situations. It helps them manage their anxieties. And children use play and social interactions not only to develop social relationships, but it's a protective mechanism. So when children are engaging positively with their friends and others, their caregivers or grandparents, this is how they figure out how things work and can cope with the environment. So basically, when children play, they can gain control of events, of rules, of processes, which helps them gain mastery, and it reduces anxiety and it helps them to tolerate stress. So that's kind of one key feature of the relationship between play and mental health. And this is how it's demonstrated. There's a quite famous study a few years back. You can see the image in the upper left from one of our play workshops with parents in Mexico. The children are dressed out as superheroes. They can define any superhero they want. But if they can pretend to have the strengths of a superhero, they also have strengths they can use in their ability to control their own behavior, their ability to imagine they can have new skills. So they use play as that mechanisms of gaining control. But any aspect of social relationship that are joyful, that has music and singing, where they collaborate in joint activities, on the upper right, where they use stories to express themselves and how they're feeling, is an aspect of play. The other thing is some recent studies, which also appear from our website, learningthroughplay.com, is how you learn to cope through play. And play is particularly important under adversity or when dealing with traumatic events. And what have been very richly demonstrated over many years is that play therapy is that is an approach you can use to cope with stress when developmentally and culturally appropriate. So play therapy, you allow to externalize your thinking in writing, in materials, in music, and then use that to regulate your feelings about that situation. And adults are particularly important in helping children deal with that stress and anxieties. So the way that works is when children construct narratives or they rehearse particular scenarios, they actually try to test out, they simulate, they practice these types of events before they happen, which means they begin to practice cognitive and emotional responses that they can apply then in future for difficult circumstances. So a lot of these activities exist now into scalable programs. And first, just to say that caregivers are absolutely essential. Obviously, parents, if that you have around, but anyone who are close to the child's emotional experiences. First and foremost, because the flexibility and resilience of adults directly influence how children respond to uncertainty and change. There are clear neurological studies that even a child at adolescence, actually, you can see how brain networks of adolescent children, young people, change depending on how flexible the adult is. So that means that the adult's behavior influence that kind of mental health. But also play is an opportunity to strengthen the relationship between caregivers and children. The more you play with your children, the more you gain an understanding of how they think and feel and behave. And lastly, when adults engage in playful experiences, it's actually beneficial to their own emotional well-being, stress and depression. So I think we've all tried to kind of do stress relief, whether we are engaging in physical play or sports or our own hobbies or any way we do that. That also helps us relieve stress and depression. So it actually helps the children at the end. So many of you would know from some of the big programs that emerged out of JMaker many years ago, but Reach Up is one of the programs that we have invested in and supported over many years. So that's a home visiting program that seeks to promote positive parenting, stimulating environments, and this active engagement that I was mentioning before. It's joyful, it's meaningful, it's opportunities to test different ideas. And it builds that self-esteem and parenting enjoyment and positive relationships which then support children's skills. And this is from the early years, from around 6 to 42 months. And it's been through a range of randomized control trials over the years. There are also other programs a little similar, for instance, in Peru, which is also a home visiting program until the age of 3 years old. It's operating in one of the poorest districts of Peru, where it seeks to promote child development through positive parenting and early stimulation by weekly hour-long play-based home visits with community members. There are other programs like the IRI Toolbox. That toolbox is used both for parents and caregivers, but also for teachers. And this is a range of sessions, 8 sessions of 90 minutes each, where the main approach is to support praise, positive emotions through a toolbox of daily play time. So it's child-led play, and there are particular activities where the toolbox comes with a toy or a book, and then it offers that as an opportunity for parents and children to engage, or teachers and children to engage. And similarly, just recently, we just supported a new program called Neighborhood Villages. And I think that's interesting because it's a full service model. What we have seen is sometimes it's very difficult for parents to engage in play because there's so many other factors that burden their daily life. So what neighborhood villages are doing is to support job opportunities, to support help with getting clothes and toys, to support physical activities. And something as simple as a snapshot here from the Neighborhood Villages Child Care Center, which is the opportunity for the family to get their clothes washed. The needs of these families are extensive. And if you don't provide the whole service model around innovating and scaling and advocating for it, then you're not going to get to the positive interactions that is needed among the caregivers and the children. So these are the activities that are so critical. You don't need a lot of expensive, fancy materials. Like Reggio Emilia, you can use nature, everyday environments to invite children to represent what they see in the environment. It's first and foremost a very social activity. This is from our play labs in Bangladesh, and which also operates in East Africa right now. It's a whole positive space created by the community with materials from the local environment, play leaders supporting the parents to develop toys with their children, and stimulating a social, safe environment to play and share your feelings. It's also reliant on physical, active outdoor experiences, and it's also giving children a safe space where they can relax and concentrate with stimulation like books and imagery. But that's kind of a rounded approach, that you have these types of opportunities that doesn't need to be expensive, but can be done in any kind of environment. So to conclude here, the evidence of play for development and learning is really gaining traction right now. This is a report we published 2 years ago where it demonstrates that play can be an equalizer. If you support parents and teachers with a stimulating environment, you can see how children from disadvantaged communities can get to the same level as children from advantaged communities. Across 14 countries, we can see these types of interventions. We can see that through a broad range of skills that are supported, where the majority of the evidence is actually now in literacy, in language, in math and science as a critical component of being supported by play. And it's a global science base now that describes what does the home, school, the outdoor environment, digital has as a role. This is a global science we launched 2 weeks ago with the Yidang Foundation in China. And last week, I was at the World Conference for Education and Child Care in Uzbekistan, where we co-launched the report on the financing mechanisms of early childhood. So with UNICEF, the Education Commission, and the LEGO Foundation, we demonstrate that if you get to 10% of your education investments, of the education budget into early childhood, you have massive gains not only into school, but for lifelong benefits on your healthcare system, on work, and society. So this report demonstrates cases from a broad range of countries on what needs to be invested in and how. And then we have a new report that is just coming out here in December around the relationship and very specific practices of play among parents. So that's a policy mechanism that is in the financing report, but then there's a bottom-up mechanism of invigorating and supporting parents to engage with children. In early 2023, we are launching a joint work with Harvard Center on Developing Child that maps the science of early development and how play can be a protective mechanism for stress and anxiety. So look out for that one coming very soon. It's very practical. When children and parents play, it's a more joyful form of engagement. These are the 5 characteristics I mentioned before. Now we share specific practices of what can be done. That a parent support a child's autonomy. You know, if they engage in a task, try to ask open-ended question. What else could you try if they get stuck? Appraise the process, not the outcome. Trying to help the child elaborate. How did you try that? Oh, that's great. You figured out an effort to go into it. Or try as much to do to share positive emotions. smile and laugh whenever there is an opportunity to do so, because it's that kind of positive emotions that helps you regulate. So finally, this is so critically important that our effort is also supporting huge investments in the humanitarian context. So our work in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, for instance, is using play as a mechanism for children to not only cognitively develop, but dealing with the stressful situations of being displaced and moving from context to context. And when we look at the needs assessments we did some years back, the children and the family said that the best things about being a parent is to see children play and be happy, to get them educated and ensure they're having food. Play is a basic need alongside food, love, and education. And finally, we believe so much in this that we're building a whole hospital around this concept. So in Denmark, in 5 years from now, we have built the world's best hospital for children and families, where play is an integrated part of the treatments that happens in this hospital. It's playfully logical. The play actually can be structured and systematized and supported in any aspect of life, particularly when you are at your most critical need. Here we are demonstrating how a brain scanner helps a child to understand the procedures they go through, similar to when children have toys and try to simulate what happens in a treatment. This is for the really ill children, but can happen to anyone in any situation. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for bringing attention to children, young children in particular, which we should promise the most of our work. And this is kind of some of the reports I mentioned. They're available at learnthroughplay.com, or else please reach out if you can't find them. I'm happy to share more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bo, for your presentation. It has shown us that fostering mental health is not only dependent on playful programs focusing on the child. We should also focus our programs in helping parents, caregivers, and community members to remember that play is fun. And aside from that, it helps in developing children's brains and holistic skills. Now, I know that a lot of you have questions. So now let's move on to the Q&A with Bo. Hi, Bo. Thank you for joining us today. We are very grateful that despite your busy schedule and the time difference, you were able to join us live this morning.
Grateful to join you.
Thank you very much. Let's proceed to the questions raised by our viewers and participants. The first one that we received said that last year we attended the webinars of the ECCD Council regarding children's rights to play. We did try to advocate play in our community, but it hasn't been well received by our constituents. Do you have any advice for local government units to change the perception of the community regarding play, because it is also beneficial to children's mental health? Just for context, Bo, in the Philippines, it is an uncommon perception that children just always play and that they do not learn anything, or they do not develop just by playing. So it's mainly focused on pre-academic skills and academic skills. So when local government units try to implement play-based programs, play-based activities, these are not often accepted by communities. So I think the question is, how will they be able to change the perception of the community regarding play? Because apparently it does not only help in the development of children, but also beneficial to the children's mental health.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. It is a challenge we see in many communities and countries worldwide. And that's why we have dedicated one part of our initiative to a play movement. So the bottom-up movement and mobilization of parents to support play. So we do still see that the policy and the trust and leadership from the government is important. that play is adopted into legislations to be able to see that we truly believe in the power of play. It should be an integrated part of early childhood. But there are three key factors that we see as particularly important. The first one is to debug what is about play. So the evidence share that it's about development and learning through play. If you start with the word play, many would say, it's childish. It's only free time. Children can do whatever they like. But we try to flip it around and say, look at the studies to say, you can actually develop emotional regulation through play. You actually develop language through play. You develop self-regulation to be able to control attention in school through play. So majority of studies that exist actually both speaks to academic school readiness and social emotional aspects. But you start with the benefit and describe how play supports it. The second one is to make it very practical for parents to engage in children's play. A lot of the examples that are shared is, let children play outdoor of materials, but it doesn't help parents to find the time in the morning, doing dinner, doing everyday activities, doing the commuting to and from the early childhood center and so forth. So try to make it very simple and practical so any parent is able to do that. And the final thing we've seen is from our massive survey we've done with the LEGO Group recently is, remember that play benefits adults. It benefits the parents. They get to know their children much better. They have less stress. They actually learn a lot from being engaged with children's play. So speak to the benefits to adults. These are kind of the examples that we have seen that is helpful.
Thank you very much, Vo. And in relation to that also, we also have people from the academe joining us this morning in this symposium. And one question is related to their work in the academe. I am a researcher from a state university here in the Philippines. From your global perspective, what do you think are the topics that we should start exploring with regard to play and children's mental health?
The most important, so there's a wide range of topics in academia right now, and I'm grateful for any researcher who want to invest their time and effort into it. What we do the most in that community is to invest in building a coherent language. Because sometimes academic and research communities try to invent new language around play and learning and development. But if we work together, we can have much deeper interventions and begin to test and try out each of the different initiatives that work. But the most important we're moving towards right now is very local, contextualized research that works with the community. Try to ask the community, what are the barriers you see, and then study these barriers to figure out how you can engage positively and stimulating with the children. So we go much more local now. We work with the communities, what materials they have in their environment, how, as I mentioned before, how play leaders can help parents develop their choice with what they have in their household. But it's very local, contextual research that helps parents observe their own children. And if that's kind of the interest that is being built up, then you also build that movement and support for parents at the end.
Thank you very much, Vo. We see a lot of questions coming in right now, although we have very limited time for our question and answer with Vo. So don't worry, we will be collating all your questions and we will be summarizing these so that Bo will be able to have that time also to respond to your questions. And we will be, that will be readily accessible for everyone to see. So again, thank you very much, Bo, for joining us in this symposium and for taking the time to impart your knowledge to Filipino ECCD service providers and workers.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So again, we know that you have more questions, but due to the lack of time, we cannot answer them all right now. But don't worry, you can still send your questions to us. We have posted our official email in the chat box here in Zoom. You will be able to see that, and in the comment section of Facebook. If you can't see it, the email is eyf@eccdcouncil.gov.ph. We will collate everything and send these to Bo so he can answer more questions that you have for him. All right, so maybe some of you are wondering, aside from play, how else can we help in ensuring that our children grow up with sound minds and bodies? To answer this, let me introduce our next speakers from One Sky for All Children. One of our next speakers is Tim Wong, Chief Impact Officer at One Sky for All Children, where he leads efforts to scale, measure, and advance the organization's global impact in early childhood care and education across Asia. Tim has also worked as a researcher, strategist, and trainer for the United Nations and Royal Government of Bhutan. He has also been recognized as a Dalai Lama Fellow, Stanford International Public Service Fellow, and Harvard Center for Public Leadership Fellow. Joining him is Vo Thi Yen, the Vietnam director of One Sky for All Children. Since 2017, she has worked closely with One Sky's leadership team and the Vietnamese government to develop the strategic plan to scale up the organization's program nationwide. She also has expertise in the areas of poverty alleviation and relief, rural development, planning and mobilization, child rights and protection, and education, especially with a focus on the area of early childhood care and education in Vietnam. Based on their profiles, I am sure that you are all excited to watch their presentation on partnering for quality childcare to advance child and family well-being. To all our participants, let's welcome Yen and Tim from One Sky for All Children.
Good morning, everyone. Hien and I are so excited today to share with you about the One Sky Vietnam model, where we're partnering for quality childcare to advance family and child well-being. So to start us off, I wanted to introduce a little bit about One Sky for All Children. We are a global NGO that partners with communities to provide quality, responsive care and early education training so vulnerable children can thrive. In 1998, we were founded, first starting training child welfare workers in orphanages and child welfare institutions in China to deliver quality, responsive care through an evidence-based Reggio-inspired curriculum. And over the last 25 years, we've developed an ECD training expertise in low-resource settings across Asia. And now in China, our approach has become the national standard of care. We've reached all 31 provinces, and we've helped the government transform the entire system of child welfare care. And a big part of our work has been validated by leading research universities, including the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. We've received global recognition from ARNEC, ECDAN, and the World Bank for our caregiver training programs. And we've reached over 274,000 children across China, Vietnam, where we scaled in 2017, and Mongolia in 2018. And so in Vietnam, to share a little bit about the challenge that we're addressing in this context, we've seen over the last decade, over 3.5 million factory workers working in rapidly growing industrial zones. The majority of these factory workers are migrants who are migrating from their rural villages, where they used to have social childcare networks to support them. The majority of them are also women, many with young children. And when these migrant factory workers arrive in these industrial zones, because of their residency status, and because of the limited capacity in these public kindergartens, they're unable to actually access public kindergarten services for their children. Private preschools are also too expensive for these families because they're low-wage migrant workers. And so we've seen an affordable home-based childcare industry emerge. These are private, independent childcare groups where these local entrepreneurial women have opened a room in their home, have a small renovated space. And we found that most low-income families actually enroll their children in these home-based childcare centers.
Yes, thanks, Sim. The home-based care model is a very special model in Vietnam nowadays. This is special because the individual set up their private house, turn it into the daycare centers. So the facilitator is not suitable and safe for the children, especially the children under 3 years old. And also most of the caregiver, the owner are not trained. And according to the MOET, Ministry of Education survey recently, 70% of the caregiver and also they are not meet the standards of the government. And also because of that and the lower fee from the parents, it makes three of them makes the very poor qualities of home-based care in that service in that home-based care area. And however, because of their lower fee and the opening times is longer, so most of the not most, but all of the poor families choose the home-based care to send their children there. So in other words, if we One Sky focus on this home-based care groups, because we know that it is a more critical need target groups need to be helped, and also we can reach the poorest of the poor from the home-based care groups here.
So as Hien was saying, this is a critical care infrastructure, and we know that there are over 16,000 home-based childcare centers of variable quality. These HBC caregivers, home-based childcare providers, receive very limited training, resources, recognition, and support. And in an untrained, often unlicensed home-based childcare center, in a typical one, you might see 24 children sitting in front of a television for most of the day. And in the worst cases, child protection or child safety risks. And so as a result, this is a figure from UNICEF Vietnam that they found over 52% of Vietnamese children, the poorest, many who are in these home-based childcare centers, are not actually receiving the early stimulation and responsive care they need to thrive.
So in order to achieve the goal of One Sky in Vietnam, that to improve the ECCE to support the poor children. So One Sky approach in Vietnam, we have two project components. The first component is, we call it is the early learning centers, where One Sky set up the early learning center in the industrial zone with the very high quality to provide the responsive care and teachings for the hundreds of children of the poorest families in the industrial zone. And we also build up that the national demonstration module where we bring the teachers and the ECCE caregiver from different HBC in the province and outside the province there to observe, to practice what the responsive care teaching there. So it becomes that the training hubs for the communities. And it is recognized by the Ministry of Education of Vietnam as the national motto on the ECCEs in Vietnam, and they invite many provincial partners come to visit and to learn from the One Sky Early Learning Center in Da Nang. And if any one of you have a time to visit Vietnam, you're welcome to visit our ELCs. I'm very happy to receive you there. The other things that is the innovation of the ELC is that the private partners, public-private partnership model that One Sky apply in Vietnam to encourage the mobilize all the social resource to support the ECCE. We partnership with the Da Nang government so they can give us the land and 70% of the construction costs. So One Sky contribute 30% of the construction costs, and then the One Sky and parents to contribute to run the ELC so that to support the poor children. So there becomes we can mobilize the both strengths of the public and private, so that we can create the very good motto with have the high qualities but very low cost. It can affordable for the poor children to enroll in. The second component of One Sky programs in Vietnam is that home-based care training programs in order to reach more and more children in other areas of Vietnam, not only in the ELC. So we decided to provide it the responsive care and training for the caregiver in the home-based care, so that they can have more knowledge and attitudes change, so they can provide the better care, quality care to the children. And so far at the moment, after 5 years working in Vietnam, we partnership with the government at the central level, provincial level, and the district level, and even the community. So we are already trained for 1,154 home-based care center, and we can reach more than 32,000 of the young children in the industrial zone.
And we know that there are multiple benefits to quality, affordable childcare. And you know, starting from the women themselves who are childcare providers, really feeling for the first time that they're respected, skilled professionals who have a sense of belonging to the profession, which is also good for their mental health and well-being. For the working parents and the mothers who have an extra sense of peace of mind, of mental health and well-being when they're working, knowing their child is in a quality childcare center. And, you know, very importantly for the children, as they're receiving responsive care, as they're playing, learning through play, as they're engaging in all sorts of activities that foster their holistic and social-emotional development, this is really building brighter futures for some of the most vulnerable young children. So we see this as a triple win for early childhood development, for gender equity, and for family and child well-being. And it really all starts from what Hien was saying about our curriculum and the way that we train caregivers to deliver quality early childhood care and education. We have 20 topics on responsive care, play-based early learning, and holistic child development. And social emotional learning and mental health are really integrated and core across the curriculum, from the way that caregivers learn about responsive care and the back and forth serve and return interactions between a caregiver and a child, to attachment, to how to communicate with parents to reduce stress and anxiety, reducing children's fears and anxieties, everything around conflict resolution between children, also just critical social emotional and life skills. And then very importantly, as Bo was mentioning earlier, about learning through play and the connection between play and social emotional learning. We see all of these as really critical to, especially coming through COVID, helping children and caregivers be well and also to thrive. In terms of the home-based childcare provider training program, which we are now scaling with the government, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we implement this program. First, we start by partnering with the government at multiple levels, as Hien was talking about. And specifically at the provincial level, we partner with the Department of Education and Training to recruit home-based childcare providers by cohorts of 40 through their existing database. We then implement this comprehensive training program with their in-kind support. And at the end of this program, all of these providers receive a co-signed certificate between One Sky and the government. It's a moment of tremendous pride for these women who really are a part of the sisterhood of care, a professional workforce that for the first time really being recognized by the community. The husbands are there, the children are there. And when we're at these graduation ceremonies, we feel that sense of energy, of excitement as well. And then even beyond the graduation, these women continue to receive ongoing professional development through annual conference, post-training courses, other ways for them to continue to upskill and to learn throughout their professions. And this is implemented through a blended learning approach. So this is, again, using that evidence-based curriculum that we talked about, this Reggio-inspired responsive caregiving curriculum, delivered through 20 in-person classroom sessions that are supported by One Sky trainers. It's blended with an online learning platform where these providers continue to connect with each other through a digital community of practice, access online resources around ECCE. And then in between the classroom sessions, home visits for providers to be coached by the trainers in continuing to deliver this sort of quality responsive caregiving. And so just as a picture of what happens in some of these training sessions, you see really engaging activities for all these home-based childcare providers coming together to learn, role plays, guided discussions, hands-on learning where they're making homemade toys from recycled local materials, blended and digital tools, both with One Big Family, our online learning platform, as well as with all sorts of different quiz software that make it really fun and engaging for the trainers to assess how the providers are learning, and then targeted practice and homework. During the home visits, this is a really critical opportunity to connect what they're learning in the classroom to how they're actually practicing and delivering this in their home-based childcare center. So our trainers actually go in to observe. They have a checklist, a monitoring checklist to look at the responsiveness of care between the caregiver and the child. They're looking at the safety of the home-based childcare environment. They're helping to demonstrate some of the best practices and some of One Sky's best practices. And then they also coach the providers to make sure that there can be quality in that home-based childcare center.
So just after every section, the trainer come to visit the trainee at their own house, observe, give it the feedback, analyze it, give it the feedback, and give them coaching. With the aim at we ensure that the theory, the knowledge they receive in the class will be applied in their effectively in their routine works to improve the quality. So many at the feedback from the trainees, so they see that they must appreciate the home visit from the One Sky trainer, because it is the significant difference between One Sky training to the other programs.
Fantastic. And as another piece to that, as I mentioned earlier, the One Big Family online learning platform, which is both an iOS and Android app, as well as can be accessed through an online website URL portal. It's really our rich online digital learning community that reinforces and extends that classroom training through actual additional resources, topics, prompts, professional development articles, support from trainers on specific topics they're learning in the curriculum. It's an opportunity for them to connect with other trainers, with their home-based childcare provider peers, with local and global early childhood education experts. And then really it's a vibrant, active community of practice. We have over 1,000 home-based childcare providers on this platform. There's a sense of not just being able to connect with each other, but being recognized for engaging on the platform through monthly, recognition activities. There's an online competition section where providers can submit their own best practices around homemade toys, local songs, other sorts of best practices that they have. We also have a rich early childhood development digital content library that's been developed from our over 25 years of experience working in the Asia Pacific region on professional development articles, play activities, lessons, local songs, local stories, homemade toy guides. These are all downloadable digital content pieces that they can use themselves in their home-based childcare center, but can also share with parents of children. And we also have had a really vibrant COVID-19 response through vetted COVID-19 resources. But I'm also going to let Hien share a little bit about how we continue to engage them.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. And you know that Vietnam also have experienced with 2 years lockdown during the COVID-19. And during that time, we changed our approach and we developed besides the one GDL here, we also develop another online platform through Yellow, Messengers, Facebook, and others, and Zello, so that Zoom also, we built up the networks of the parents, the teachers, and the children together in order to support them and encourage them in time, especially during the very hard time during the COVID-19 lockdown. And we have some principle that every child need to have at least 3 times interaction through online every week. So during that time, we make sure that they can meet their parents, their children, their friends, and their teachers. So they have built up the social emotional development for the children. Besides that, we make a lot of clips and training materials, guidance materials to provide to the parents and also to the children to help them protect their children in COVID, prevent them from the COVID, train them the living skill to protect the children, especially when they stay alone at home, when their parents have to go to the factory for the whole days and night. And this is we, together with the parents and the social, to create the environment, the safe and encouraging environment for the children development.
Fantastic. And this is all connected to the next point we're going to talk about, which is caregiver mental health and well-being. We know that everything from the training to the home visits to One Big Family to the way we were able to support caregivers during COVID really centered around community, really creating a network between the caregivers themselves, the home-based childcare providers, also with the parents. And we know that human connection and belonging in this profession of being an early childhood educator is so critical to sustaining your motivation, your belonging, and your ability to, deliver quality, responsive care to children. And we know that that really all starts from caregiver well-being.
Yes, you see that beside the online in-class training and online trainings, we are focused more on the caregiver well-being or mental health of the caregivers. You can see during the contents of the topics, we focus a lot of content on that. And also we conduct many activities for the caregiver with an aim at building their mental health. Like we conducted the annual conference for them to come, to share, to practice together, and to meet in person. Just sometimes just to talk, to share the feeling. And we conduct many competition, the games online, so that they can participate and share their products to the others. We aim at the build up the networks, the communities of the caregiver, thousands of caregivers in the project area in the countries, because we understanding that even the most professional caregiver, she is not the machine but the human being, and the human beings have a different times of moods, feeling, emotion, and this affect directly to the children when she contact with the children. And so that is why we are trying our best to build up the well-being, the mental health, give it a lot of practice on meditation, on breathing, on speaking in front of the people in the public, so that to build them the confidence to be calm when to have a proper treatment to the children. You know that in Vietnam, we have the saying that the happy teachers can change the world, not only the children. So that is very important why we must focus on the mental health of the caregiver and the well-being of the caregiver.
Exactly as Hien was saying, happy teachers lead to happy children. And we know that caregiver well-being leads to child well-being.
Yeah.
That sort of any of the emotions, the stress, the anxiety, children can feel that from their caregivers. And so we start there from the caregiver, but then we also at the child level think about from the curriculum, the social emotional learning, conflict resolution, learning to share and to look at their own emotions, different mindfulness exercises for children, as Hien was sharing, which we also do with the caregivers around breathing exercises, stress management, emotion management, and then really importantly also engaging the parents in that process. So parents are partners to play, parents are partners to the child's well-being. Everything that's happening in the home-based childcare center, that's happening at the ELC is also happening at home, so that they also have a safe, nurturing, calm, and responsive environment for them. Yes. And we've received fantastic feedback from home-based childcare providers. Ms. Khan, one of the One Sky trained home-based childcare providers, said that this training program has really helped keep her love and passion for this job alive. Ms. Mien shares about how being a part of this supportive community means we're not alone in getting through the pandemic. And again, coming back to that human connection, that belonging, that sense of well-being that's possible when we come together in community. And it's also impactful and effective. In 2019 and 2020, Harvard professor Aisha Yousafzai and her research team, along with the Research Training Center for Community Development in Vietnam, completed a really pioneering independent impact evaluation of our program, which was actually the first to evaluate a home-based childcare training program in Asia and the largest outside of high-income countries. And she found, and their research found, that there was high provider satisfaction with the training. There were sustained improvements in the actual childcare quality, sustained positive improvements, including in the physical environment, and very importantly, in the caregiver-child interactions, in the inclusiveness of care, and then really importantly, in the actual child development outcomes, improved positive child development outcomes in fine motor skills, visual perception, early learning scores, and then sustained provider motivation, connection, and belonging during COVID-19 through digital support and One Big Family. And so this is not just evidence that's helpful for Vietnam, but as Aisha writes here, this is really critical because there's such limited evidence on childcare globally that we need to be sharing this evidence. We need to be finding ways to promote high quality childcare programs. We've received plenty of global recognition for our work in Vietnam. And really, it's all done with partners.
Yeah, you see that when the Ministry of Education and Training in Vietnam, they have a high recognition to One Sky projects, especially our training to reach the poor children. So they suggest us to extend our project to the many provinces so that they can benefit more children. And after the reviews, we scan in on the social other partner in the areas, and we will find out several things. You look at the screen, you can see this is the potential partner with the very suitable strengths and function, legal function of the government that is very suitable to our programs, like the central government, the Ministry of Education and Training, provincial Department of Education and Trainings. We contact with we will partner with the technical consultant company that can bring their highest techniques to projects to build up the qualities. We also partner with the philanthropy organization and the private sector to support the programs, and especially with the community partner that are very close to the teachers and can give a very in-time support to the children and to the teachers in the communities. And you know that all of this, that we can build up the strong network to support the ECCE and the children in Vietnam.
So as Hien was saying, these are all of our partners at the moment in helping us scale our program to reach every child in a home-based childcare center, from our technical partners like Harvard and ID Insight and the Global Early Child Development Action Network, to community partners like the Women's Union, to the central government, the Ministry of Education, to even philanthropy, especially philanthropy, thinking about the Asia Philanthropy Circle and many of the members who have been supporting our work as well. All of our partners are a really critical part of making sure that we can scale and so and change the system of care for the children. And so as a part of that, from 2018 to present day, we've now reached 5 provinces across Vietnam. We've trained over 1,150 home-based childcare providers who have improved the quality of their home-based childcare center for over 32,000 young children. And in a really exciting development at the moment, just yesterday, we were in a meeting with the Ministry of Education. We're currently co-convening a technical working group of early childhood development experts here in Vietnam to develop, based on the One Sky model, the national guidance, implementation guidance for early childhood education in all home-based childcare centers in the country. And we think this is a really critical part of setting the national standard for early childhood education in these centers.
Yeah, regarding the national guidance team, you know that the reason why Ministry of Education invited for cooperation of this, because they appreciate the curriculums of One Sky, because they say it is very suitable to the home-based caregiver in different areas, because they are from different education level. And our curriculum, it fits them and very simple and very easy to apply in the home-based care center. So that is why they invited for cooperation to write out the national guidance. And we hope that this, when the national guidance is complete, it can be used for the whole home-based care in Vietnam as the guidance from the government.
And with wind at our backs, that's exactly what our plan is. Moving forward, by 2025, we'll have reached 10 provinces across the country. We'll have doubled the number of home-based childcare providers and young children we're reaching. And we're going to begin training government trainers in this model to scale this nationally and transform the whole home-based childcare system. And just to wrap up here, really, we see this as a multi-sectoral effort to reach children across Vietnam with quality early childhood care and education. Over 16,000 home-based childcare providers, 63 provinces, over 600,000 young children. And really the vision is a quality childcare system that promotes and centers family well-being, gender equity, nurturing care, so that an entire generation of young children can grow up healthier, more well, and happier.
Yeah.
And so with that, thank you so much. And, please feel free to reach out to Hien and me. And we're also happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Nelson.
Thank you, Yen and Tim, for highlighting the need for quality childcare and sharing how One Sky was able to capacitate caregivers in Vietnam. As a trainer of child development workers here in the Philippines, I am proud of what you are doing, and I am sure that your impact will benefit children and communities for years to come. Additionally, I would also like to emphasize the importance of achieving sustainability in early childhood programs, which you were able to address. This is an important aspect in creating development programs, since we all aim for communities to maintain their ECD programs even after we train them. Should you have questions for Yen and Tim, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A feature of Zoom or in the comment section of our Facebook Live and YouTube channel. So before we move on to the next speakers, let's all take a break. We have prepared an icebreaker activity that will be led by Mr. Redentor Balmores from the Ramon Aboitiz Foundation. Hi, Rid. I'll pass them on to you and join the activity as well.
All right. Thank you, Miss Katrina, for introducing me now. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our icebreaker activity. It was mentioned earlier that play and having fun is very important, right? And of course, it was also mentioned about mental health. At this point, I am inviting you to have some fun and play at the same time, share some experience about your mental health. Okay? But I need your help if it's okay for you. We will be sending a Mentimeter link. Same also no, in our Facebook participants, Facebook viewers, we will also be sending a Mentimeter link. We will have an activity. And by the way, if you were able to log in to our Mentimeter, can you type in the chat box, yehey? Can you try in the chat box, especially in our Zoom participants? Can you type, yan, I can see John, all right, Franco is saying yehey. And also for those Facebook participants, you can also type in yehey in the comment section while we are waiting for our participants to log in the Mentimeter. All right, I can feel the excitement. Okay, so for our activity, for our play, no, to participate also, I have presented here a QR code so that it would be easier for you to go to our Mentimeter link. But for those of you who have logged in, that's good. I can feel that you are already familiar with this Mentimeter, and it would be easier for us to have our activity. All right, most of us are ready. Our activity for today is very simple, but I think you will be challenged to be creative. You will also be challenged to think outside the box. And of course, you will be challenged how fast you can type in the chat box or in the Mentimeter. Okay, instructions for our activity. There will be a series of pictures that will be presented on the screen. Your task is to guess the word by putting the pictures together. Okay, the title of this activity is Guess the Word. By the way, if you cannot see if your screen, your phone or browser is not aligned with what I'm sharing right now, please click the go to slide on the upper portion of your screen. Okay. Example, yes, I can see Gail is typing rainbow very fast, but I can see that the answer is already on the screen also. Okay? Sige, sige. This is the first picture. Okay. Sige nga. Can you guess what is the word that we are looking for? Okay, I can see, okay, webcam, webinar, webinars, okay. Okay, coming in, the Zoom webinar is the highest. Okay, COVID-19, very interesting. Why COVID-19? All right, webinars, webcam. Okay, I think the largest answer is webinar. Okay, webinars is reaching also, no? Okay, the correct answer is webinars. If you can still remember, the last picture is a nurse. All right, sige, sige. But webinar is also okay. Okay? Yes, there's a web, there's a trash bin, and there's a nurse. How about this? Try to check if you know this word. Okay? Go ahead. Please input your answers. Boy Scout, boyhood, brotherhood, almost. We also have childhood, Robin Hood. Okay, I can see some Robin Hood here. Okay, okay. Good, very funny. You have hilarious answers here also in the chat box. Okay, children. Okay, all right. The correct answer is the largest word also here in our screen, childhood. You can see the child, and you can also see the hood. And if you combine it, it's childhood. Okay, before we proceed to our next picture, let's have some question and answer also. We would love to know, what was your favorite game as a child? Can you type in the chat box? I can see Super Mario, Sipa, Shato, Shatong, hide and seek. No, this is also my favorite game as a child. Loksong Tinik, I can also see here in the chat box. Batulata, very familiar. Patintero, Tagu-taguan, hide and seek. Sleeper kick. Okay. All right. Okay, good. I think most of us have the same favorite game, no? And it's good to know that a lot of us have experienced these games. Right. Next challenge. We only have one picture here. What do you think is the word that we are looking for in this slide? Play. Okay. Play. Okay. I think everyone knows this picture. Very familiar. Okay, good. The correct answer is, oh, that's correct. The correct answer is play. Okay. How about these pictures? Okay, I can see well-being. Okay, I think this is very easy for you. WebLink. Okay, WebLink, very funny, no? Almost there. Okay, because there's an ink. That's why WebLink. That's also valid. Okay. Okay, the correct answer is well-being. Okay, because our words for today is related to our topic. Okay, before moving on to the next picture, we would also love to know, what did you learn as a young child that is still valuable to you today? Hard work, that's very beautiful. Values, no, very important. Be happy, okay? Being kind to others. Creativity, I agree. Values, joy in reading. Friendly, okay? Habitual reading. Respect elders. Values. Okay, honest and values. All right. Thank you very much for sharing. No? How about this next picture? This is very difficult. I hope this would be a challenge for you. This would be the last picture. What do you think is the missing word? Try to check. Are you familiar with this word? Sleeping Beauty? Resilient? Be happy? Okay. Resilient, resilience. Sleep silently? Okay. Resilience. Okay, resilience. Yes. Most of you got the correct answer. It's resilient. Wow, very good. Thank you very much. No? But before we end, we would also love to know, as a child, who helped you nurture your mental health and made you become more resilient? Because it has been shown, no, that positive relationship can help in maintaining mental health, at the same time improve your resilience. We would love to know how or who helped you and how did they help you. Okay, I can see mother, lolo, parents, okay. Friends, yes, friends. Teacher, okay. Auntie, teacher, parents. All right, thank you. This is the last question. We also want to know, what was the impact of play to your well-being when you were still a child? We would love to know, what was the impact of play to your well-being when you were still a child? Enjoyment, pakikisama, relaxation, competitive, socializing, makes me happy, knows how to communicate, self-confidence and happiness. I can see different positive words here, no? Leadership, good sportsmanship. And please go ahead, keep your answers coming. And these answers, these collective answers that you have, is an affirmation that play has a positive impact to each one of us, right? It was mentioned earlier that social connection is very important. No? Play can help in terms of building social connection, because children, when they are in play, they make sense of the play. Just like what we did earlier in the pictures, we make sense of the pictures in order for us to know what is the word that we are looking for. All right? Again, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for this very quick activity. I hope you have fun. In behalf of Center for Leaders, thank you for playing with us, and keep playing and learning. Ms. Katrina, I'll give back the virtual floor to you.
Thank you very much for that fun and very relevant mind exercises, Rid. I actually enjoyed playing along. So to all our participants, always remember to take a break amidst your busy schedules. Remember, we also need to take care of our mental health and well-being. So again, if you have questions for Yin and Tim, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A feature of Zoom or in the comment section of our Facebook Live and YouTube channel. Before we move on, okay, so I see that a lot of our participants are from the academe and ECD policymakers, program development officers, and implementers in local government units and the private sector. Thank you all for joining us today, and I'm sure that the next presentation will be of high interest to all of you. So Bo, Yin, and Tim have already given us a lot of examples when it comes to ECD programs that we can start in our communities. But to substantiate and contextualize all of these, we need an overview of the ECD landscape in the country so that we know when, where, and how to start. That's why we are lucky to have our next speakers from the Center for Evidence and Implementation, or CEI. One of our speakers is Dr. Gayatri Kembavi Tam. She is a pediatric physical therapist with over 25 years of experience working with children and families, teaching and training, and supporting research and evaluation. Her areas of research interest and expertise include children and youth with disabilities, community inclusion and participation for people with special needs, interprofessional communication and collaboration, and qualitative and participatory research methods. Her work has also covered a range of activities, including research and capacity building. Joining her is Esther Go, an early childhood development specialist with a breadth of experience across education, policymaking, and philanthropy. Over the past 10 years, Esther has taught kindergarten, worked for the Singaporean government, and also supported the strategic development of early childhood policy and programs from within an international foundation in philanthropy. She has also led the coordination and provision of technical assistance to government and strategic partners globally. Beyond these roles, Esther has co produced and directed a short film highlighting the work of maternal mental health para counselors with the Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh. To all our participants, please help me welcome Dr. Gayatri Kembavi Tam and Esther Go as they present the results of CEI's Regional ECD Landscape Study.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for that introduction. I'm Gayatri Kembavi Tam, and I have Esther with me. I see both our faces are together in one screen. We'll be sharing some early findings from our regional ECD landscape study, and I'll just take you through a little bit of the background, some early findings from Indonesia and Singapore, before Esther will take you through some detailed findings about the Philippines. And then we'd be happy to take questions afterwards. So the background to this study, so I'll just skip over that. And so just before we begin in the actual presentation, we just wanted to acknowledge the incredible contribution of our advisory group and funders for this project. Coordinated by the Asia Philanthropy Circle and a number of organizations which should be familiar to all of you. And together they have funded and made possible this study. So the rationale behind this landscape study was that the first 6 years of a child's life really does lay the foundation for their later growth, their functioning, and their adult potential. And this critical period of early childhood development, or ECD, can really be enhanced by a strong early childhood system within a country and regionally that addresses any potential adversities, but also supports healthy development of children. But even strong ECD systems can have gaps in their service and program provision and potentially their policy landscape, which means that some children and some families may not be able to access effective interventions or effective programs to really address their specific needs. So the idea behind this was that we really wanted to understand what was happening regionally in Southeast Asia in terms of ECD programming, policymaking, and how evidence was being used to inform both programs and policies. And the primary audience for this study is not academia, but local and regional philanthropists who could have the capacity to either further strengthen or start new programs, and also policymakers, so that they can understand where additional attention might be needed, either within a country or across the region. So the 4 countries that are included in this study are Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines, and China. And at this point, we have completed our work for our landscape study from Singapore, Indonesia, and the Philippines, and are in the process of completing the work in China. And then all the findings will be consolidated early in the new year. So the three research questions that guided this study very quickly were: what parenting and ECD policies, programs, and services are currently being implemented in each country, specifically for children ages 0 to 6? What are the gaps that exist in both ECD policies and program provision when mapped using the nurturing care framework, which we'll very quickly describe? And finally, have any evaluations been undertaken of these ECD programs and services, and what are they, and what were the findings? So those three questions were what was used to guide the landscape study. And just a quick note about landscape studies is that they really provide a snapshot of what is happening or what exists in a certain period of time. They don't necessarily have in the methods of a landscape study, you don't have the capacity to understand why something continues to be a problem or what would happen if this particular thing was done, and so on. So this is just really the what is happening now and what are the gaps in what is happening right now. So the activities that we undertook very quickly were a desktop search to identify policies and programs and services. We interviewed experts that were identified through the desktop search, but also through advice given to us by the advisory group, the organizations that you saw before. And then we looked and reviewed all the evaluations that were publicly available and mapped these to the UNICEF mega map. We won't be talking about that in as much detail right now, but we will be focusing in on the other findings. And what we used to frame our research was the Nurturing Care Framework and the World Bank 25 key interventions that they have identified as being key for ECD. And so by mapping the policies and programs to the Nurturing Care Framework, we were then able to provide a more comprehensive view of the landscape in each country. And then as we do our analysis across countries, we'd be able to show similarities and differences. So the Nurturing Care Framework, I think is the next slide, that's right. The Nurturing Care Framework was developed, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, was developed by the WHO, UNICEF, the World Bank group in collaboration with a number of ECD partners. And it's really one of the core principles that guides the study. There's 5 components of the Nurturing Care Framework: good health, adequate nutrition, responsive caregiving, safety and security, and opportunities for early learning. And those 5 components together promote good physical, emotional, social, and cognitive development of young children. And it really, the framework itself and the guidance around the framework really emphasizes the need for a whole of government and whole of society approach to ensuring that the youngest children can thrive. And within this, the role of parents and caregivers in healthy ECD through responsive interactions, positive relationships is really, really important. And just as another note, that UNICEF and other international agencies use this framework when they conduct rapid in-country assessments of the ECD landscape. So we are conducting this study in line with what happens internationally. So a very quick overview of the overall findings, and this is mapped to the Nurturing Care Framework. So the colors correspond to each of the components. You'll see that when you look at Indonesia and the Philippines, if we just focus on the programs of Indonesia and the Philippines, that although there are 54 programs in Indonesia for early childhood and 76 in the Philippines, you'll see the distribution between the 5 components of the Nurturing Care Framework are quite similar, except for the dark blue, which is security and safety. So Philippines has more programs proportionally in security and safety than Indonesia does. You'll see that Singapore looks quite different, and that of the 92 programs that were identified, 72 focused on opportunities for early learning. Only 1 looked at safety and security, and the others were much less in proportion compared to opportunities for early learning. If we look across policies, so these are government policies that are either enacted in legislation or enforced in other ways. You'll see again that Indonesia and the Philippines have some similarities in that policies around adequate nutrition take up a fair proportion of the total number of policies. In Indonesia, the policies around responsive caregiving are relatively fewer compared to that of the Philippines and Singapore. And again, in Singapore, you will see that proportionally, overall, there's far less policies. So there's 13 total policies that pertain directly to ECD compared to 30 in the Philippines. And that proportionally more of them have to do with security and safety, and then the others are equally distributed. So it's interesting to look across the three. And when we have findings for China, we'll add that in, and then it'll be interesting to compare how they compare. So we had some, now these are very early findings. And so some of these, when we integrate it, might look a little bit different. But for each of, except for Philippines, which we'll talk about in more detail, for Singapore and Indonesia, we're presenting just some very overall findings. So the key strengths in Singapore is that there's a comprehensive healthcare system with easy access for all citizens. There's a stable environment in the country that promotes child development, and there has been increased funding towards early learning in the last few years. There are still gaps in Singapore. So one of them is that there is a lack of coordination and integration across programs and services, which does make it difficult to navigate for families that have other issues that either are low income or have other needs. There's very little data at a national level about caregiver mental health. And there's also little data, population level data about breastfeeding. And in general, from the data, we could find low rates of exclusive breastfeeding at 6 months. So that was one gap. And that in Singapore, in the last 3 years, particularly, there's been an increasing rate of childhood obesity. So this is another area where in Indonesia, there was, and Philippines, more issues with malnutrition, as we'll see in a minute. But in Singapore, it's increasing rates of obesity. Very quickly, the findings from Indonesia. The strengths of Indonesia is that there definitely seems to be a political will to tackle urgent issues. So things like stunting, access to health. And when we say that there's political will, this is because of the types of policies that have been recently enacted or brought about in Indonesia. Indonesia does have a funded national health insurance system that has specific provisions for families, women, and children. And there are quite a few parenting programs that are specifically for vulnerable and low-income families. But there are gaps that continue to exist in Indonesia in early childhood. One of them is that while overall the stunting prevalence has decreased over the last 10 years, it still continues to be an issue, particularly in certain regions, and that this indicates that more has to be done in a cross-sectoral manner to ensure that the programs that are in place are implemented well and consistently. There are still inequalities in the healthcare infrastructure, which means quite high out-of-pocket costs for families. And that despite the high rates of maternal depression and anxiety that have been reported, there are still insufficient programs that address this issue. And finally, that from a policy perspective, that maternity leave provisions do not cover those women who are in the informal work sector, which is roughly 64% of all working women. So there's a large number of women that don't get leave when they have babies or any other type of provisions to support them in their early days of childcare. And I'm going to turn it over to Esther now to talk through the specific findings from the Philippines.
Thanks, Gayatri. So hi, everyone. Nice to see you. And I'm going to go into a lot more detail in the Philippines into each of the nurturing care components. So first up, we wanted to talk about adequate nutrition. So what we had found was the Philippines is actually very much on track to meeting the SDG targets for exclusive breastfeeding by 2030. There is a very strong focus within the sector on workforce training, parental education, and advocacy. And there has been significant progress being made to reduce stunting and wasting. At the same time, we do have to acknowledge that it is still a significant issue across the country, especially in very specific areas. In terms of areas for action and what can be done within the Philippines, there are two big things. One is to support stunting reduction. I think this is quite an urgent issue and has very significant long-term effects. So we kind of have to start now just to ensure that strong programs are being implemented in specific areas to address this issue. At the same time, there is also an issue around the double burden, what we call the double burden of both overnutrition and undernutrition. So we've talked about stunting and malnutrition, but also obesity and overweight is an issue in the Philippines, and how to balance the two sides and to ensure that there is adequate nutrition across the early childhood range is a crucial area that would need further attention. Looking at good health, the Philippines, based on government policies, does have universal health coverage and especially universal oral health coverage. There is attention being paid to the lowest income groups. However, we do see a lack of data and hence understanding of how mothers and caregivers are being supported, especially in their mental health and well-being. This also extends to service provision. We don't quite know how much parents are being supported or whether they are able to access support for their mental health. Also, we see a decreasing rate of routine immunization. I think this has many reasons behind it, some of it societal, some of it due to the lack of access during COVID lockdowns. And lastly, we also found that there was a need for further training and capacity building, especially for the workforce within healthcare. So then looking at areas for action here, there are three big areas. One is how can we ensure that caregivers and mothers are being supported in their mental health? This we know as having a significant impact on child development even before a child is born. Two, how do we address barriers to immunization? This is quite an important area where we're looking at how can we increase trust in the government, increase trust in the vaccines itself, but also then looking at addressing the physical access to immunization across the country. And thirdly, then how can we identify workforce training organizations, increase training in of the public healthcare workers, and ensure that their capacity is being supported so that they can provide the best care to caregivers and to young children. In the third nurturing care component, we're looking at opportunities for early learning. I do want to note that when we talk about opportunities for early learning, we're looking both at childcare, like formal early learning opportunities, but also early learning within the home environment. So in terms of findings here, we see that especially the work of the ECCD Council, there has been a very strong focus in both policies and programs related to early learning. We see this through, setting up model preschool centers, heavily increasing training of educators, and also working with parents to increase their awareness, both of the importance of early learning in the home and in preschools. However, we do see that there is a lack in population level data, especially in enrollment and on learning conditions. So not just how many children are attending preschool, but what is within the preschool? What are they receiving in the time that they are in the preschool every day? Secondly, we also see a disconnect between national strategy and how the strategy is being implemented locally within LGUs. And the last point here is that we have observed a concern around the impact of school closures over the last 2.5 years. Of course, now schools have reopened in the Philippines, so this is also something to keep an eye on to see how children are coming back to early learning opportunities. How are they engaging with teachers now? and how are parents also engaging with these services. One crucial area for action here is then how can we support LGUs in implementing programs? So we've observed that despite the scope of federal programs, especially through the ECCB Council, LGUs are often not quite equipped to set up early learning and care spaces. So what is the level of support that they might need? How can we help to build their capacity, build their knowledge and understanding of the importance of early learning, and then work with them to establish and maintain quality early learning opportunities and spaces. In the fourth area of responsive caregiving, to be honest, like you've seen earlier in that big overview, I think every country that we've reviewed in this study is rather light in terms of policies around responsive caregiving. It is quite a new area that is emerging. We do know that the Filipino government has generous policies to support women through maternity leave. In contrast to Indonesia, this also includes women within the informal workforce. I just wanted to take note of that. And in terms of programs, they are often conducted in tandem with other types of support, such as healthcare, nutrition, or social assistance. This is quite crucial, and we've seen through evidence globally that this is a good practice to have to ensure that women and families do receive the care that they need. However, again, there are persistent gaps within practice. One of the reasons is within the workforce. How are social workers hired? What are their job scopes? They're often overstretched and underpaid, with a large amount of responsibilities being placed on them. When you have multiple programs expecting social workers to do different pieces, it can be quite a huge burden on them. So in terms of what we can do and areas for action then is how do we not only use social workers as a key avenue, but also then promote responsive and positive caregiving practices on a country level. We do know that it is a crucial part of parenting. So then there is a role in the government to then shift cultural practices or to work with local communities to shift cultural practices related to parenting. One way to do so would be to work with local researchers, one to understand what the barriers and facilitators are, and then to bring that into existing programs that work with parents and to refine program content there. And the last nurturing care component of security and safety, we do see that in the Philippines, the national provision of social assistance is a large part of that safety net for families. And it's also through things like the 4P program, where the government is able to provide additional support and knowledge for families, not just in responsive caregiving, but also other areas of parenting, and to ensure that children have access to regular health checkups, that they're being enrolled in school, and families have access to support. There is an issue here with poor implementation and enforcement of laws. This is especially for that safety aspect or child protection, women and children protection. And lastly, there is a lack of community understanding. So we have policies that are implemented and put in place at a national level. What does that mean within local communities? How can we get local communities to understand the implications of some of these policies? Would be a crucial piece. And related to that, then, in terms of action, how do we improve support and access to rural communities who often may require more resources just to ensure basic service provision? So within that, it's working with LGUs to understand what are their needs, not just some financial needs, but also maybe material support, and perhaps even bringing a number of LGUs together with similar needs to work together and to learn from each other. So that would be something to think about. Of course, looking across the 5 nurturing care components, there are pieces which I've put out here that are relevant across all 5 components. So there are 3 big topics here. One is, how do we build the local knowledge base? This relates not just to an understanding of policies and programs, but also how can we work with local academic institutions to develop research that meets the current gaps in understanding. Some of these things could be along the lines of understanding the cost of breastfeeding or lack of breastfeeding, the impact of maternity leave coverage, the impact of the Early Years Act. But these are things that we can do within the country and build up that local academic knowledge base. 2, we think about how do we strengthen local government capacity. I think I've mentioned it across some of the components, but really with the Filipino decentralized model of governance, then working with LGUs is crucial to implementation of policies and programs as well. And then there is probably a piece of work there that we can do to ensure that LGUs are equipped to take on the work, to take on the policies and programs, and to implement them well. And thirdly, how do we strengthen data-driven decision-making? Of course, the first step to that is to make sure that we actually have data across the country that everybody can draw on, everybody can look at, and be sure that it's reliable so that we can make decisions based on data and not just, intuition is one way of putting it. Next, if we think back to the last research question, then it's on evaluations. What evaluations have been undertaken in ECD programs and services within the Philippines? So across the 76 programs that we've found in this landscape study, for the Philippines, only 21 programs have been evaluated, and the evaluations are public. So out of this, 8 of them are peer-reviewed journal articles and studies, and 14 of them come up in the grey literature. You do see that across the 5 nurturing care components, it is relatively even, with more programs within the component of health. That is also because we do have more programs within health, so that's a natural spike in that sense. Now I want to bring us taking a step out from the Philippines again, and looking at the 3 countries again, and just to highlight what are some of the strengths and what are some of the things that may be needed across the 3 countries that we've observed. This is quite preliminary, of course, because we don't have the findings from China yet. But if we're looking across the region, there are 3 big things here, which is very promising. One is we see across the 3 countries that there is a strong focus on children, families, and the communities around them. This focus has increased over the last few years, especially from the context and view of the government. 2, we do see that there is increasing attention to positive parenting practices and responsive caregiving. This is quite crucial, especially within the context we sit in. And 3, we do see a trend of increasing public and private investment towards early childhood care and development. Yes. Looking at what is needed, and these are common points that we've seen across all 3 countries. The first big thing, as you would have heard before as well, is data. So how can we get data that is accurate, that is readily available to stakeholders and system actors to use? 2, how can we ensure that there is strong coordination and by extension, collaboration across stakeholders within the government, within your LGUs, and within civil society. Three, how can we ensure that we have a workforce that is well trained, that is sufficient, so you're not losing many people that you're training, and that is recognized by the community. We do know from global research that part of retaining an early childhood workforce isn't just about pay, isn't just about training, but that community recognition is crucial to retention as well. Four, how do we ensure that we have strong, independently conducted, high quality evaluations to contribute to the evidence base locally and also regionally? And the last point is on the policy and regulation environment that puts the needs of children and families in the middle of it all. I think there is movement in this area across all three countries to look at the policies around children and family. But what else needs to be done? What are the gaps here that we can potentially work together across the countries in the region to ensure a stronger child-centered environment, a family-centered environment? So that's all from us for now. And thank you for listening, but welcome any questions later on.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gayatri and Esther, for presenting the research findings of CEI. It is a very timely research that can surely be used by our participants today. Some might be wondering if this research has a connection to the mental health and well-being of young children, and I can confidently say that it does. Because in order for us to properly address the needs of children and their families, we need to build on our strengths and ultimately work on the areas that need to be improved. This is especially true when it comes to early childhood programs in the country, since it is not that well known and understood by many. Additionally, it was stated in the CEI's research that we have 30 policies on early childhood. Now, going back to mental health, how many of these specifically address the mental health and well-being of children in the early years? And to talk more about this, we have invited a speaker from the Department of Health Philippines, the primary government agency mandated to support the mental health law in the country. She is the officer in charge of the DOH Public Health Services team, and she has recently been one of the 11 awardees of the Outstanding Women in the Nation's Service Awards, or TOWNS. She is known to provide the evidence needed to support health system reforms by designing innovative research grants and building institutional capacity for policy research. A lot of Filipinos are also very familiar with her already, since she is one of the medical practitioners that has been in the forefront of the country's battle against the COVID-19 pandemic. To all our participants, let us all welcome Dr. Beverly Lorraine Ho, or more commonly known to us as Doc Bev.
Good day, everyone. On behalf of the Department of Health, we would like to thank the organizers for providing us with this platform to share with you our work, our shared advocacy on mental health, particularly for children. This talk is entitled Integrating Mental Health into Our Children's Early Years. So we always ask ourselves what makes a whole population healthy, and data or evidence has continuously showed us that as much as 80% of what contributes to the health of Filipinos or even of a child would be factors outside the healthcare system, or what transpires outside of clinics and hospitals. And these are socioeconomic factors, physical environment, and their ability or their parents' ability to continue to promote healthy behaviors for children. So with this, it is clear to us that two of the biggest thrusts under the UHC Act are to protect and enable Filipinos to care for themselves and the community. And for children, this means enabling parents to care for themselves and their children, as well as taking care of Filipinos when they need it. So the first item is definitely something that's more multi-sectoral, while the second part, the bottom 20%, will still need the help of different sectors, but largely under the health sector's leadership. We at the Department of Health adopt the Health Promotion Framework Strategy, which talks about the 7 areas or 7 healthy behaviors we want every Filipino to grow up imbibing, no, or being part of their DNA. These include eating well, moving right, taking care of their environment, washing their hands, being prepared for disasters, getting themselves vaccinated, avoiding tobacco, alcohol, and of course, dangerous drugs. Then taking care of themselves and the people around them, meaning their mental health, practicing good sexual and reproductive health behavior, as well as violence and injury prevention. So let's go straight into mental health. We know that it continues to be a problem in the Philippines, and particularly, this is the latest data from our Young Adult Fertility Survey, wave number 5, which shows that 17% of kids, no, or young adults 15 to 24 years old have ever thought of committing suicide. A third of whom experienced it more than once, or experienced ideation more than once. Among these 17%, 44% actually had acted on their suicidal ideation. But looking at the entire group, again, it's 7% of the entire 15 to 24 years old who were surveyed actually had a suicide attempt. No? So we don't have mental health data for younger children, but it is clear to us that a huge part of what we would consider as mental health does not really require services concentrated in specialist hospitals or even in medical care. So our current reality is on the left-hand side of the screen. So it's an inverted pyramid, and we really wanted to move towards the right-hand side. So really looking at mental health promotion and prevention in community settings, and looking at it not as a disease, but actually a way of life or part of wellness. And going up until it becomes specialist care in psychiatric hospitals. After all, hindi naman talaga lahat, yun yung kinakailangang services. So mas marami yung may kailangan dito sa base. And so what are our mental health plans, programs, and activities? We want to continue to address various risk factors through healthy settings approach. And this means work in communities, work in schools, as well as national policies. For example, we issued out this policy on ethical and responsible reporting and portrayal of suicide in media. And we actually put this in place because we know that children tend to copy what is actually they're seeing on TV, for example, on Netflix, on whatever they're watching, right? We also provided this template health promotion playbook for mental health to assist LGUs in setting up community-level social support structure. Admittedly, this is more geared towards adolescents. And then lastly, we had this promoting health and well-being in schools through our healthy learning institutions in partnership with DepEd's OK or Upland Kalusugan DepEd program, wherein we will be piloting mental health and sexual and reproductive interventions among grade 5 to 6 students. So kanina, 15 to 24 years old, and we're hoping to get data on grade 5 to 6 students, and we will be implementing mental health interventions po sa kanila. This is applicable for 273 last mile schools or schools in geographically isolated areas. We also want to continue to address these risk factors through certain interventions, such as the Lusog ISIP application, which was developed alongside our partners from USAID Renew Health. So this is an app that allows patients or individuals to just log in, reflect, and listen to other coping mechanism, such as mga gratitude exercises, meditation. These are all tested for Filipinos. Then on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see our initiative also, but this is largely driven for health workers naman. So we piloted behavioral nudges in 20 hospitals in the country, and next year we will be scaling it up to 100 hospitals. So this is really helping our healthcare workers to cope with the stress of being in their profession. So the DOH also produced the Omnibus Health Guidelines for Children. And under this Omnibus Health Guideline, we actually put here what the ideal healthy lifestyle practices and household practices that must be adopted. I won't read through everything. We can provide you copies of these slides. Also, health-seeking behavior, screening, and management of mental health-related concerns. Also, we have provided standards for medicines that might be needed in certain cases. And basically, it's the primary care provider who will be giving these medications. We also note that primary care providers need to also advise and educate parents and or their caregivers of children with developmental delay or disorders and behavioral disorders, and not really conflate each one with the other. So in terms of improving access and service delivery, we continue to provide with the assistance of our legislators who have allotted budget for this, mental health essential medicines in 362 access sites all over the country. We have national and regional crisis hotlines available all throughout the country. And there's a single toll-free line that you can call Luzon-wide, which is 1553. And for Visayas and Mindanao, it's 1-800-1888-1553. So we also have done massive capacity building with the help of many of our partners to train all our frontline health workers on the MHGAP and MHPSS. So as you can see, many of our interventions are really a mix of preventive, promotive, as well as curative services. We plan to have the cascade of healthcare providers, starting from our general care providers from the barangay to the province, as well as develop the basic comprehensive, advanced comprehensive, and national specialty centers. We also do have the creation of the IRBs, or the internal review boards, within each of these facilities to just make sure that the human right approach to caring for our patients will actually be carried out. We do also have several leadership and advocacy activities that have been done alongside our civil society partners. So with this, we do note that we have, with our partners, progressed a lot in terms of what we can do for mental health, but clearly, we also know that many more can be done, particularly for the early childhood life stage. And we look forward to using this platform, the ECCD, particularly Council, in order to help us work together towards having a more responsive program, not just responsive, but I would say more proactive program in ensuring that the 0 to 5 years old kids will actually have a better appreciation and better taken care of in terms of their mental health. And perhaps a lot of the interventions will really include parental education. So we look forward to hearing from our fellow council members and our stakeholders. Let's work together. Paano pa natin to maipapagpabuti para ma-expand natin yung mental health services para sa 0 to 5 years old. Maraming salamat po ulit.
Thank you, Doc Bev, for sharing the initiatives of the Department of Health in the Philippines in promoting mental health in the country. You're right. For ECD, we know that we have a long way to go in order to fully integrate these in our programs for children and see its impact. But we are positive that we are on the right track. We have now reached the end of all the presentations for today's symposium. Now we will move forward to the next part of our program. We will listen to our reactors, and it will be followed by the Q&A portion of our program. If you have questions, for our speakers, kindly submit it via the Q&A feature here in Zoom, and we will try to address them as much as possible. We have seen that some of you have questions already, and we will try our best to answer most of them. At this point, I will turn you over to our Q&A moderator, Ms. Suyin Liu from the APC or Asia Philanthropy Circle.
Thank you, Trina. Good morning. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. Thank you for your inspirational words, Senator Ontiveros, Mr. Romel Isip, Ms. Rina Lopez, and Doc Bev, and of course, insightful and aspirational examples from our friends at LEGO, One Sky, and CEI. Now we have the opportunity for two of our Asia Philanthropy Circle members here in the Philippines to react to the previous speakers and share the valuable work they're doing on the ground. So let's begin with Ms. Amaya Aboitiz, President of the Ramon Aboitiz Foundation, or RAFI. Hi, Amaya.
Maayong buntag sa kanatong tanan, magandang umaga. So I'm, as Suyin said, I'm Amaya, representing Ramon Aboitiz Foundation from Cebu. Most of our work is in the province of Cebu. And I was really inspired by a lot of the presentations this morning. The ones of Dr. Bo and of One Sky really inspired me. I'm an early childhood educator, and so really hearing about play and working with families is really, it really resonates with me. And at the Ramon Aboitiz Foundation, we have a program. One of our early childhood programs is to create early childhood learning spaces, so daycare centers that are conducive and safe and that promote play. So they have features like a playground, the furniture and things are set up so that children are encouraged to get their own materials. They can switch the lights on. They have toilets that they can use independently. And so these are just ways that the physical environment can be set up to promote independence, confidence, and ultimately well-being. We also know that just having the space itself is not enough. And so we also have we are piloting a training for early childhood workers, and it's called the DUA Academy. So DUA is play in Cebuano. And so it really centers around this and helping child development workers really appreciate and learn how to use play to enhance children's development. We were really appreciative to see the One Sky model and see a lot of the features that we have in our own training is there. But there are also things that we can learn from that. So we would be happy to touch base and learn more moving on. We also have a grants program that supports ECD programs in Cebu City. And as One Sky pointed out, really involving parents is very important and caregivers. And so we work with NGOs in the city that have close community ties, and many of them, some of them are here today, like Kids Life Foundation. We also have a partner called Arcanis. They have strong parent education components. And these are, we've seen the positive effect that having a parent education component can have, not only on children's learning, but really also on the way that they parent, and that supports children's and families' mental well-being. And in all of this, we find that collaboration and partnerships are really key. And we're grateful for opportunities like this to come together and share and learn. So at RAFI, in our home in Cebu province, we bring together the stakeholders, and we're happy that some of them are here, the LGUs, NGOs. And so thank you to APC and to the ECCD Council for bringing us together today. We're happy to share what we know. We're happy to partner with you. And we're also really happy to learn. So thank you, Suyin.
Thanks so much, Amaya. And now let's hear from Stella Aguila, Education Consultant from Ayala Foundation. Hi, Stella. What were your thoughts on the
Hi.
And
good morning.
AF for ECD.
Thanks, Suyin. Thanks, Amaya. Good morning to everybody. I'm Stella. Suyin said I work with the education team of Ayala Foundation. And before anything, I just want to say thank you to all the inspiring words and all the messages that the speakers imparted this morning. Thanks for your time, your expertise, not only in the space of early childhood, but also really thank you for opening and continuing this conversation about mental health, because this discussion has to keep growing and continuing beyond obviously today. So thank you for that. The ECCD programs of Centex at Ayala Foundation promotes a holistic development of the child. So the mental health of the children, the parents, and all the primary caregivers, and of course the daycare workers are really top of our mind. And we integrate this into the different programs that we have when we talk about our ECCD program. So it's not just about the education of the young child, but it's also about teacher development and parent and primary caregiver and community sustainability development. So if you just bear with me, I have a very, very short, I promise. I just want to share with you what we do, and I think Dana has it up there on the screen for you all to see. Yeah. So the ECCD program of Centex, change slide, please. This is a really quick overview. Rina this morning graciously gave you a little bit of what we do. The program currently has 2 sites, and at the core of all of our programs, including the elementary education, is really to deliver sustainable programs. Next slide, please. And the components of our programs are students, teachers, and really the parents and the stakeholders. So when we talk about the ECCD program in particular, we really are talking about a holistic program that touches all of the community. So when we go into a community, we're engaged for a year. Some of the communities are engaged us for 3 years. Next slide, please. And we have professional development, which includes teacher training throughout the whole year. We have targeted key learning areas. We've got enrichment sessions. We have mentoring, which is a one-on-one mentoring program for the daycare workers. We have follow-through sessions that really focus on home-school connections. So what's happening in the daycares are carried on and followed through at home. Next slide. The student engagement, as I mentioned, is how we engage with the students. These are really young, 0 to 4, as we all know. I'm also an early childhood trained teacher, and I worked in that area for a very long time. We provide kits that are thematic based. We teach the teachers how to engage them through play. It's a very play-based approach that we have. We're very lucky to have a really fantastic ECCD training team led by Pat Choi, who's also here on the call with us. Next slide. Community engagement includes launching different programs in different sites rather, and then we engage, including the parents. Our values education includes mental awareness for them, because although we know it's really important for young children, we also are very cognizant of the fact that the adults surrounding the children play a really important role, and this was highlighted during COVID when they were all at home. Next slide. Our current sites, as Rina shared with you this morning in her introduction, include the Buklod Bahayan, which is our older site in Silang, Cavite, which has been around since 2017. And I believe we have 5 ECCD teachers that we work and mentor every year. Recently, next slide, please. That's the Buklod Bahayan. Next slide, please. And the Iraya Mangyan is our latest program. Well, latest meaning it started in 2020. So right, bang smack at the pandemic, but this really serves the Iraya Mangyan community, which is an indigenous group in Puerto Galera, in Talipanan. So we hope to grow this program. We only have 2 teachers there, but they're fantastic teachers, very involved. The ECCD circle that we have, although there's 7 of them, they cascade it and they share with their neighboring daycares, but we really hope to grow in this space. So our goal really at Ayala Foundation through the Centex programs is to continue rolling out these our ECCD program so that the childcare workers, all the early childhood educators involved, the parents, extended family, the lolos and the lolas, and the LGUs who we work very, very closely with are equipped to provide, safe, nurturing environment so that, our young children can really continue to grow and thrive. So thank you for this time. I will turn you over to Suyin.
Thanks, Stella. So I hope for everyone who is here with us today with all this valuable information, you're all motivated to ask questions. Please send your questions on the chat box. And if we are not able to respond to your questions due to time constraints today, we will definitely follow up with responses and post at a later date. So please just keep the questions coming in. So for our first question is directed to our APC members in the Philippines. The question is, how can APC members collaborate with government and local communities to implement the Philippine ECCD strategy? I'd like to invite Sildy Gonzalez of the Zwilig Family Foundation to respond first. Sildy?
Yes, thank you, Suyin. So local governments under their mandates in the local government code and relevant laws should be able to develop policies, implement programs, and provide budgets for ECCD. However, local governments' capacities vary. The quality of ECCD program implementation also vary. In the foundation, the Zwilig Family Foundation, our core strategy is collaborative partnerships with local governments at all levels, from provinces to municipalities, cities, and barangays. This is to strengthen leadership and governance of maternal and child health and nutrition systems and programs, and at the same time ensuring that we deepen community participation through LGU mechanisms that should be in place for increased barangay and community engagement. In our work in ZFF for LGU collaboration to be successful, it needs to have clear targets that clearly state improvement of outcomes and do not just focus on activities. This ensures that everyone in the local government, including the community, understand the issues on ECD, the implications of this issue, and allow them to own and co-own the challenges and targets and co-create the solutions to achieve the local government unit's vision of a healthy ECD. Thank you.
Thanks, Sildy. Amaya, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there are many different ways that APC members can engage and collaborate. I think we bring with us the huge network and the experience and the knowledge, and I think that this is something that we can share the best practices with our local governments. I think we can also really listen to them and find out more what their needs are, and develop programs based on those things. I think Esther raised a really big gap, which was the data, and this is something that we see across all of our programs actually at RAFI, the need to develop ways to gather more data. And I think that as NGO and private sector, we probably are in a better position to start this and link up with governments to support them in building ways to get more reliable data and then move them through the process to incorporate data in their decision making. Thank you.
Thanks, Amaya. Now, Stella, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I think just taking off from what Amaya said, if we work together as members of APC and cascade like this, the research findings, and really involve all the stakeholders and impact all our various ECCD programs, the cascading of this, the results that will be cascaded can be used to spread awareness. And we're all trying to do this on our own, but I think if we do it as a collective effort, it's a little bit more. The impact is much bigger. And then to the point of CLD about LGUs, yes, we personally have, not personally, but Ayala Foundation works very closely with the LG, and the moment you have their buy-in, it really impacts the program in ways that you couldn't imagine. So if we can continue to lobby through our own programs, the LGUs that we are involved with, or we think of going into, and especially the LGUs, we're trying to identify LGUs with the highest number of 0 to 4s. Those are really important. We can prioritize going into those areas for ECCT programs. The last point, I think, is the thrust of Ayala Foundation's Centex programs are really professional development, because a lot of daycare teachers are volunteers. Some of them don't even have a degree in education. So if we really would like to professionalize public daycare teachers and give them commensurate salaries, because I think that's a really big step forward for us, and it will help just really bridge the gap that we're trying to bridge. So I think the best teachers really should be in daycares.
Thanks so much, Stella. I hope that we can definitely continue to pursue the dialogues, and all the programs will get more collaboration. For our next question is actually for Tim and Hien of One Sky. Since establishing the HBC program, how are you able to address the challenge of parents who have various levels of education? This is one of the challenges we face with our home-based program locally, in which some caregivers have very minimal educational attainments.
From the different level of the and the parents.
So just so we understand a little bit better, I think we heard a little bit about the parents here, and we first trained the home-based childcare providers, and we have those linkages through the home-based childcare providers to the parents. We also engage parents directly at our early learning center model. I think a big part of the way that we engage at various literacy or education levels is that our curriculum is kind of adapted to really kind of low resource settings. And so it's practical, it's simple, it's engaging. We use role plays, we use demonstrations, and then we build on existing knowledge after we've assessed it to add additional, more complex knowledge, more skills practice. We use One Big Family, our online learning platform, and all of that's just reinforced, starting from a really kind of core curriculum that really meets caregivers at whatever level, whether they're parents or they're childcare providers, and then is reinforced through home visits, through One Big Family. But I want to see if Jen has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think it is very interesting questions, and this it remind me about our implementation for the last 5 years when working with the caregiver with different education level. As mentioned by Tim, that designed the very powerful curriculum, very simple, practicals, and focus on the daily works of the caregiver. We encourage them with the practice by on-the-job trainings with an aim to provide them not only the knowledge but also the attitudes change to the way to look at the children's so that they can change their interaction. It reminds me for the first day when we conducted the HBC training, two of the trainees come to the training and they don't know how to read or write, illiterate. And you know that they are farmers, and now they turn their homes, their private home, into the home-based care, and they don't know how to read. How can they work train in the ECE? And then we send our staff sit beside them, read the material for them, and then they can contribute, they can give their opinion, and they can integrate it with the trainings. Regarding the parents, you know that our our children here are the poor children, the children of the poorest family in the communities. The criteria joining us is that they have no house, they live in the rent house, and their incomes is under $170 per month per person. So you know that most of the time they are very busy and very tired in the factories during the daytimes. And when they come home, they used to not care, they ignore the children. And so we have the program called the parenting program that we provided the parent, the ECCE training for the parents, that if they want to send their children to the ELC, they need to take the course of that with the 6 module with 18 section, 18 lesson. So after the working out, they just come and take 1 hour for a week to learn that. That is aimed to provide the information, the knowledge about the early child development so that they can understand more about the children. Besides that, if they send the children in the ELC, they are required to stand at least 1 time per month to enter the class, to sit in the class with their children and with the teachers. And they are encouraged to train the children. For example, if they are the carpenters or they are the tailor, and then in the lesson we learn about the tailoring. So the parent become the teachers, and the teachers become the assistant to the parents. So by the time the parent involved in the classroom at the ELC, they observe how the children interact each other and how the teachers also that behave to the children, and they learn from that and they can apply that at home. So this is, besides that, we have the parent association, and that association have a very close relationship with the teachers in our school. And the teachers and the parents build up and also on the staff try to build One Sky ELC like the house, the common house for all the families, parents, and teachers in the communities. Did that answer your question?
Yes, I think we'll get more questions about that after your answer. But thank you very much, Tim and Hien. We look forward to finding more opportunities to learn more from your experience and implement that here in the Philippines. Our next question is for Gayatri and Esther at CEI. This is from a local government unit worker, so local government unit LGU. I work for an LGU here in the Philippines. How can we utilize the results of your study in order to create relevant programs for children's mental health?
Sorry, I was trying to find my mute. I think the results of our study will indicate in a general sense where the gaps are. We haven't looked at mental health specifically, but I think it's important to recognize that often children's mental health is linked quite closely to their caregivers' mental health, and that's one of the gaps that we're finding across not just Philippines but the other countries as well, that we don't know very much, but we're also not doing very much for caregiver mental health, not only both before pregnancy, during pregnancy, and then after. And that's not just maternal mental health, but it's anyone who's providing care for the child. So I think from an LGU perspective, one place to start would be to examine what services are provided within your LGU for caregiver mental health, starting with, do you need more information on what the mental health situation is and what the needs are, and then addressing those issues. And I think by addressing it from that angle, it will have an effect on the children's mental health specifically. And I'll ask Esther to chime in if she has anything to add to that.
No, Gayatri, I think you've covered most of it. I think also, understanding what's going on within the LGUs in terms of maternal caregiver mental health is already a big step. I think in terms of children, the mental health of young children, then really, I would say it's got going back to training of the workforce, especially your child development workers and child development teachers. Within the LGU, are there pieces of information, local information that you can share with them so that they are able to identify and support young children? I think that would be that would already have a very big impact at this point.
Thank you so much, Beatrice and Esther. So as predicted, more questions coming in, but we will only take two more since we have limited time. So back to Tim and Hien. How were you able to convince the government in Vietnam to sustain your programs in the country? Or in general, what were the factors that contributed to the sustainability of your programs?
It's a great question. I think a couple of things come to mind. First, really a big part of our approach comes from demonstration, being able to have policymakers, have folks who influence the levers of change within a system to really see how our programs run on the ground, to really see the power of responsive care in the way that the curriculum is delivered by home-based childcare providers. And a big part of that is our National Demonstration Early Learning Center, where we host government delegations, other officials. It's one thing, seeing the data, and we also generate evidence working with partners like Harvard University to do impact evaluations. It's another thing to actually, see the transformation that's happening in these children's lives over a period of time, and really seeing how a community of practice can be formed around that. So I think, from my point of view, building authorization through demonstration and building authorization through evidence and data, I think were two ways we really got the government's buy-in over time to become a really critical partner in scaling our program.
Yeah, and beside that, when we design the programs, we usually refer to the policies and also the the strategic plan of the ECC in Vietnam. So we find out the gaps, and we try to make our program in the parallel, so we can mobilize the resource from the government into our programs. And we are also consistent with our final objective, that is improve the ECCE for the poor children.
And so I think being able to tell that story around the child and really being able to center their narratives, being able to tell the story of the home-based childcare providers. We use video, we use data, we use demonstration. I think really making it come alive for policymakers beyond what they read on paper, but really a felt sense of we're in this together, and aligning the other stakeholders. Philanthropy, APC has been a really critical partner, and many foundations, other community partners. I think really trying to build that broad-based movement.
Thanks so much. And now for our final question. Our final question is for Gayatri and Esther. Based on what you shared, we already have a lot of policies for children, and we even have the law on mental health. What should be done for these policies to reflect programs and services in communities?
So I can start, and Esther can add to my response. I think the one thing that we found, and it's not just for the Philippines, but it's for Singapore and Indonesia as well, is that the policies might exist, but it's whether and how they're implemented on the ground that seems to be where the issue lies. And I think in the Philippines, what we found is that there's a lot of contextualization that's needed of the policies. And so even if the policy is formed at a national level, there are unique characteristics at the regional level that mean that there's extra support needed at that regional level. So it could be financial support, it could be understanding the local context and how that policy actually should be implemented locally. And I think what needs to happen is more dialogue with LGUs, with the people in the communities that maybe are wondering, how do we go about implementing this policy? Because it doesn't either make sense for us the way it's written, or we have unique things that are going on that mean we need extra support in order to implement it well. And And I do think it's not just unique to the Philippines, but in Indonesia as well, because of that disconnect between the national government forms policies and expects the local government to implement it. There maybe needs to be a middle level where there's maybe a bit more oversight or some more support that's provided. And that could be where NGOs or local other organizations could become involved in supporting that implementation. Esther, is there anything else I missed? I'm sure there is.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that we heard in a number of interviews with experts across the Philippines was really that disconnect between a national policy, which is usually to some extent aspirational, versus what's happening on the ground within LGUs, within barangays, where they have a completely different issue that they're tackling with. It's way more urgent. So then it's difficult for them to see putting time towards it, something that for them may be 2 or 3 steps down the road. So how do you work with LGUs to build that implementation pathway to be able to break down the policy in a way that makes sense to the local context is extremely crucial for this, and not just in the Philippines, as Gayatri was saying, but also in Indonesia and in Singapore, just building a stronger connection there.
So thank you all so much for your time and sharing and answering the questions. There'll be more questions coming your way for you to respond to. But thank you also for all the impactful work that you do. So at this point, I'll turn you over back to Trina.
Thank you, Suyin, for facilitating the Q&A. And thank you to all our speakers and reactors for sharing your insights for today's symposium. It was really a very fruitful discussion that will hopefully be the start in the creation of more programs, research, and policies to support children's right to good mental health and well-being. So to formally end the symposium, let us all listen to Mr. Lawrence Lien, chairperson and co-founder of the Asia Philanthropy Circle, as he shares with us his closing remarks.
Thanks very much. I'm so delighted to be here. This has been a great event. I am the APC chair, and I started APC because I believe in collaboration, and this has been a wonderful collaboration, not just among our members, but also with the ECC Council and the many people who have spoken and who are participating. So big thanks to all speakers, respondents, organizers, and participants. The theme is an important one. It's early childhood development is also something that my own family foundation is very invested in, and we have worked with CI to create actually a center in Singapore to support this effort on an ongoing basis. Our center is called Child, and it's very much around learning from the world, learning best practices, and integrating with evidence and implementation science, right? Because ideas are easy to come by and good ideas, but implementation is hard. So I think today we have heard from experts and best-in-class models. We started with IKEA, and I learned from them that it's important to start with the benefit and to tell people that you can develop that benefit with play. We have heard from One Sky, which is an incredible model on how to scale and impact through building capacity, including how to work with government. We've heard from CEI and the Philippine government on the Philippine situation, the gaps, and what we can do to do better. And what is left is that we must build on this momentum to act. Today is part of learning globally. Sorry, I said IKEA, but actually it should be Lego Foundations. To learn globally and act locally. Ideas are easy, but as I mentioned, implementation is hard. So part of learning is not learn the concept, but to learn to implement. And implementation is hard, so we need to collaborate, which is very much about APC and our DNA. And then we've got 4 great members here whom you have heard from. We need to, particularly from what we heard from CR, invest in some infrastructure. I'm not talking about buildings, but things like data infrastructure is very important. This is a public good, and philanthropists and funders need to come together to support this work. And there's a lot of work in building capacity throughout all the LGUs and all those caregivers and teachers in this space. The work can look daunting, but as our friends from One Sky said, well, just you do it through demonstration and evidence. Start small, but pilot first, but always have scale in mind, because quite often we do things without appreciating, what can this look like with scale, at scale. And then some programs just cannot scale because it's just too costly, right? So we have to think about the long term, but start small and show success. With that, thank you very much. Thank you to our speakers from Lego Foundation, from One Sky, from the Philippine Department of Health, from CEI, our members, Knowledge Channel Foundation, Ayala Foundation, Zurich Family Foundation, and from Aborted's Foundation, and all my and the ECCD Council and the APC team. So thank you, and we hope to see you again sometime soon.
Thank you, Mr. Lien. We are really grateful for your support in early childhood programs and the conduct of this symposium. We really have to learn globally and act locally. May we all be able to work again together for the Filipino children. And before we say goodbye, again, we would like to thank everyone who made this event possible. Our OIC Executive Director, Mr. Romel Isip, the Asia Philanthropy Circle, together with the Knowledge Channel Foundation, Ayala Foundation, Ramon Aboitiz Foundation, and the Zulig Family Foundation. Our speakers, Senator Risa Ontiveros, Mr. Bose, Tiarna Thompson, Tim Wang, Voti Yen, Dr. Gayatri Kembavi Tam, Ms. Esther Go, and Dr. Beverly Ho. Our icebreaker facilitator, Mr. Redentor Balmores, our moderator, Ms. Suyin Liu, and of course, our reactors, Ms. Amaya Aboitiz and Ms. Stella Aguila. Lastly, we would also like to thank our participants and viewers here in Zoom, those who are watching from our YouTube channel, and the ones who joined us via the Facebook page of the ECCD Council, Knowledge Channel Foundation, Ayala Foundation, and the Department of Education. Just a short announcement, the ECCD Council has posted the link of the evaluation form in the chat box here in Zoom. To receive your certificate of participation, please ensure that the information provided is correct and complete. We will keep the evaluation form open for 2 days, and take note that the e-certificates will be sent on a later date. To everyone with us today, we hope that this symposium sparks discussions and ideas that will eventually lead to more programs and policies that can help in achieving a mentally healthy Philippines by raising mentally healthy children. Again, this has been your host, Trina Libron. Thank you and have a nice day. Maraming salamat po ulit sa lahat at paalam.
Thank you, Trina. Thanks, Lawrence. Thanks, Amaya. Tim.
Much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.